Today, I'm excited to sit down with Jen Miller, who's going to share some emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping, with us. Sorry, I think there was a little bit of delay. Let me reintroduce. Today, I'm sitting down.
It's a little bit.
Sorry.
Sorry, Brandy. It's just a little bit like laggy on your side, like it's breaking up.
Okay, let me check my internet here.
I'm plugged in to Ethernet just to make sure I'm okay. So let me know if you can hear and see me okay. But
yeah, I can. I'm gonna get mine closer to the router. Okay, so this. Okay, so we should be better. So let me try that intro again because it was definitely lagging. Today I'm excited.
We could also turn off our video and just see if that will help because it looks like you're still frozen on my side.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Today, I'm excited to sit down with Jen Miller, who's going to share some emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping. This is intended. Let me just start over. Hang on. I'm going to do a super short intro.
No
keep it simple.
Yeah.
Today, I'm excited to sit down with Jen Miller and talk about emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. Jen, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brandy. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here. So could you start off just sharing a little bit of your backstory and how you discovered emotional freedom technique?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I discovered EFT probably just a couple years ago. And really what led me there was just my own journey with anxiety. So I've always felt that anxiousness. I can remember even from being a little kid through my teen years, up to the current day. And so that was something that really led me on this path of exploring my health and wellness. So that took me, originally to do a degree in psychology. I was super fascinated about just human behavior and, maybe why I was experiencing what I was with regards to anxiety. So I loved that. And then a few years later, I actually went back and did holistic nutrition certification. So that was just another avenue to really explore that sort of health space even further and at a more deep level. And all of this was really just guided by, like I said, sort of my own experiences and just knowing that there were so many ways to support yourself out there. And then ultimately that ended up leading me further down the path to a few years ago where I came across the technique through actually Gabby Bernstein. So you may be familiar with her, maybe your listeners are as well, but she's an incredible spiritual teacher. And I have followed her work for a long time and read many of her books. And I was just Googling, anxiety, how to support yourself kind of thing. And I came across one of her YouTube videos where she did a session on EFT for anxiety. And so I did that. It was just maybe, a 10, 15-minute session. And I just fell in love with it. I experienced a lot of benefit even that first time. And then from there, I just practiced it almost every day myself. So I went back to that one of hers, and then I found, other teachers that were sharing EFT tapping sessions. And yeah, I tapped all the time because I was experiencing so much benefit from it myself that I just was sort of hooked on it. So yeah, that's sort of what led me to finding the practice.
Okay. Prior to discovering EFT, in regards to your anxiety, what other techniques were you using to try to help control it?
Yeah, so I would say like the first thing I really did in maybe my like early 20s was explored working with different alternative practitioners, so naturopathic doctors, acupuncturists, and that type of thing. So that was sort of my first kind of foray into the health space with regards to my anxiety. And, I was able to really work on changing and making tweaks to my diet and how I moved my body and supported myself from that perspective, which really did help. But I think I was always just still feeling like I didn't have a tool necessarily that really made the impact that I wanted it to. I had tried meditation, different types of meditation as well, which I still absolutely love meditation. I think it's incredible and really important. But I was just so stuck in my head and, the overthinking, the ruminating, like those types of things. And yeah, so I hadn't really found something that totally addressed that and like almost helped me really get out of my head and into my body, because I think that's such an important piece with anxiousness, is dropping out of the mind and into sort of that presence and peace with the body. And yeah, I hadn't found a tool that really did that for me up until that point.
Okay. I have kind of another question just to tease out a little more about how EFT works and maybe how it's a little bit different than meditation. So, for me, I tend to be quite tense in my body. So oftentimes I feel like I can kind of work myself into a state where I'm present in the moment. However, I still have quite a bit of tension that I'm holding on to in my body. So is EFT something that can help with
Mm.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So EFT is amazing in that it's really supportive from a very holistic perspective. So from the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, it sort of addresses all of those avenues. So maybe I'll just explain a little bit how the practice works, and then we can sort of talk a little bit about the tension piece, if that works for you, Brandy. So yeah, so EFT, it sort of consists of two parts, and it's based in, I would say, sort of like Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, as well as psychology. So it's addressing both sort of the energetic piece with regards to you're actually tapping on a series of points in the body that are acupressure points. So they're the meridian endpoints. And so as you're tapping through those points, you're also saying statements. And the statements are meant to address basically the uncomfortable aspects of how you're feeling. So you're tapping whilst saying those statements. And so, yeah, it's really powerful in that it helps to actually physically shift the nervous system into that parasympathetic state, so into that rest state. It helps to reduce stress hormones in the body, and then it's rebalancing those energetic pathways as well. So in that, it's not only impacting you physically with regards to really actually reducing that stress response in the body, which that's really where that tension piece could come in, Brandy, and help, relax and just release a lot of that tension in the body. And then also, the energetic piece, as well as sort of the mental piece. If there's any sort of, rumination and things like that, it can really support that too.
Okay. And how long does it take to work through a sequence? And I guess, is it a sequence, or are there certain areas of your body that you can tap just throughout the day to kind of help relieve stress? And does it look different based on what your goal is?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, so typically there is a sequence that you work through there's 8 points that you would go through sort of sequentially. But with that said, I always really teach that you can use the individual points sort of ad hoc throughout the day to give you relief as well. So let's say, for example, maybe the collarbone point. That's a really nice one. There's also a point on the hand as well. That's, a little more accessible if you're in public or somewhere where you don't really want to, people to notice what you're doing. That one's a little bit easier to get to. But yeah, it's really great to just pick a point and tap on that. You can definitely find relief in that too. But a typical tapping sequence would include those 8 points that you would move through sequentially. And you would keep going, throughout those 8 points as you're speaking through, your statements. And so the statements are going to be where things will sort of differ depending on what you're working on. So what is your most pressing issue? So that's what sort of the terminology is with this practice, is your MPIs, your most pressing issue. So let's say, that's anxiousness, or maybe it's tension, or maybe it's, you're feeling really sad, or, anything. It could be even a physical symptom like digestion issues or whatever it is. And so that's where the statements themselves would be basically curated to whatever that uncomfortable experience is. And so that's sort of where things would differ a little bit, but you would always typically be tapping through those sequence of points.
Okay. So I've got a couple of questions from what you just said. First of all, is kind of how many taps per location in that 8-step or in the 8 sequence positions? And then also when it comes to those MPIs, what would some examples of those be?
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of like how many times you tap on each point, there's no right or wrong with that. Like I really believe and teach with this practice that, really follow your intuition and what feels good in your body. So I don't say, you have to tap on a certain point X amount of times. I think it's just sort of follow what feels good for you. I would say I probably tap on each point maybe like 10 times. I don't know. It just depends also on the statement too, and how long that statement is. But I really, really encourage just listening to your body. So I wouldn't say that there's sort of a right or wrong with that piece. And then, so some examples of the MPI type statements. So let's say if we're using that example of anxiousness, so maybe that's sort of the biggest thing up for you right now. So you could start by saying, even though I'm feeling so anxious right now, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So that's typically sort of how the first few statements is structured, just to really say, even though I'm feeling this uncomfortable thing, I love and accept myself. So it's really giving ourselves that opportunity to acknowledge and accept how we're feeling. And then once you're sort of going into the rest of the points, it would just be things like, I'm feeling so anxious. All of this anxiety in my body and my mind. It feels so uncomfortable. I just want to feel better. I just want relief from this anxiousness. And those are the first, few statements, is again, really acknowledging that uncomfortable aspect. And some people are a little bit like hesitant around that. So like, oh, isn't that sort of negative or going to like further make me feel worse if I'm just, really talking through the uncomfortable aspects? But it's actually the opposite. It's really essential to acknowledge the uncomfortable and really, give yourself permission to do that before you're able to actually work through a lot of that stuff. Because I think probably a lot of us can relate to, feeling something uncomfortable and wanting to sort of push that down or ignore it. And this practice really helps unearth that, because that's going to allow us to then move through it. So those are the first few statements, is sort of the acknowledging the uncomfortable. And then how I typically teach it is I'll then go into a round where it's a little more affirming. So it'll say something like, I am safe to feel this anxiousness. I am safe to let this move through me. I give myself permission to feel this anxiousness and then let it go. So stuff like that. So it's just a little bit more affirming once you've really acknowledged sort of the uncomfortable pieces of it.
Okay. So if you're moving through that tapping sequence, would the statement change based on what you're tapping? So you would start maybe with an acknowledgement of what's making you uncomfortable, and then continue moving towards that release?
Yeah. So you would start typically on the side of the hand. So there's a point on the side of the hand that's called the karate chop point, and you're tapping there for the first couple statements. And that's where you're saying those statements around, even though I'm feeling X, so maybe anxiousness, I love and accept myself. And you sort of say similar statements to that for a few times on the side of the hand, and then you move into the rest of the points. And then you're sort of, just for the first round or first 2 rounds, really acknowledging those uncomfortable aspects. There's no, you don't need to say a certain type of statement on a certain point. It's really just, moving through that sequence of points as you just talk to how you're feeling. And then, yeah, then when you feel ready, or, as I teach in my guided sessions, then we'll move into a round that's a little bit more of those type, I am safe to feel, I'm safe to let this go. I give myself permission to let this go. And, just those kind of I am and I am safe type statements.
Okay. What does so since you mentioned the guided sessions with you, what do those typically look like? Is it one-on-one guidance? Do you work with groups? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I do a little bit a variety. So I would say that how I got started in this practice was really following a guided type session, but then also just really taking this practice and making it my own and having this tool at my own fingertips to support myself. And so that's really inspired me to take that into the work that I offer. So I offer both guided sessions. So I'll do live group sessions. So I don't do a ton of one-on-one, but even, for example, last night I hosted a group session on Zoom where I guided us through a live tapping meditation. And, I just sort of leave time for everyone to repeat after me as I say the statements, and we just move through it together. I also have a membership where I have basically a huge resource library of recorded tapping meditations on tons of different topics that my community has access to, that it's just like a recorded meditation that they then tune into and can then have that at their own fingertips as well. But yeah, I'm a really big believer in like instilling this and sharing this and educating people on this tool so that they can then take that and use it for the rest of their life. Like I really want to empower people with that tool. So that is really weaved into a lot of the work that I do.
Okay. So a couple of other questions around that. With these guided meditations that you lead, how long are each one of those typically? And then the same question, kind of if you're out and about, and here I'm thinking specifically for being in uncomfortable situations over the holidays with family, or, being super stressed, what would be something on the spot that could be done like pretty quickly that might help relieve some of whatever is being felt, stress, anxiety, whatever it is?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, so in terms of the length of the meditation, so it varies. I would say within my membership, all my recorded sessions, they're probably anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, somewhere in that range. And yeah, and then the live ones will vary too, just depending on how much time we've slotted and what type of session it is. But last night I did one that was about 30 minutes long. So kind of slowing it down a bit and leaving a bit more time for dropping into the body and that kind of thing, in addition to saying the statements. But yeah, that will vary. You can also do really short ones too, like just taking a couple minutes to tap. Even like 30 seconds can be really impactful. So that, I don't want to discount that either. Yeah, and with regards to your question on, what can people do around the holidays if they're experiencing some stress or anxiousness kind of in the moment? And yeah, I would say with that, if they want something that's just really quick, is to actually just pick one of the points like we were speaking about earlier and tap on that point. So there's one on the hand that I really like for that, which is sort of just like on the top of the hand in between kind of the pinky finger and the ring finger, sort of in the middle there, just above the knuckle. It's kind of hard. Just tapping on that point is really nice. That point specifically will really help to calm the nervous system. And I also personally really love the collarbone point. I always speak about that one because that one just feels really good to me. I think because we hold a lot of tension, we hold a lot sort of in that space of our body, sort of in our chest, our shoulders, our neck, kind of area. And so that can be a really nice one too. So even just like popping into the bathroom if they have a moment, and just taking like a couple seconds to tap on a couple points, or again, with that point on the hand, that can even be done like without anyone noticing at all. So those would probably be my top tips for something super quick and accessible in a moment to use.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, would it be possible to, I mean, I know we're just talking here, but would it be possible just to kind of quickly walk through kind of where those points are located in the body within that 8-point sequence?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So the first one is on, like I said, the side of the hand. So that's called the karate chop point. So you can just kind of picture where you would karate chop something. It's right on that point of the hand. And then the next point is right on sort of the inner edge of the eyebrow. So the eyebrow point, and then the outer edge of the eyebrow, and then under the eye, under the nose, under the mouth. So this is sort of right below the lip and kind of in between the lip and the chin, right there. The collarbone. So that's sort of just like, I don't know, if you feel your collarbone, just sort of below that and a little bit inwards toward the middle of your chest. It's just like right on that point. Then the next one is under the arm. So if you were wearing a bra, sort of right where the bra strap would hit. And then the last one is the top of the head. So those are the 8 points.
It's so interesting that all of those are located in the upper half of the body. Like, is there some kind of, how does that tie in? And
Yeah.
with EFT, are there any points located in the lower half of the body that you would ever use?
Yeah, so the sort of the reasoning behind those specific points. So again, those points are based on meridian endpoints from like an acupuncture perspective. So they're all sort of associated with the major organ systems in the body. And the reason for that is just that as you tap through those points, you're then sort of opening up and rebalancing that flow between all of those major organ systems. And so that's why those points are used. In the practice of tapping, there aren't typically points on the lower half of the body, although of course, there's tons of acupuncture points on that and on that portion of the body. So I'm sure there would be some, helpful ones to tap on there too, but that's not typically used in the practice of tapping.
Okay. Uh, I okay, I feel like from this, there's about a million more questions, and I definitely want to go like try out. I'm very tempted to sign up for your membership myself and try these out because they sound wonderful. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, so I think just, I don't know. I think with this practice, why I love it so much is just that it it gives you this tool to be able to self-soothe in a way that's really effective. And I think that's so important for all of us nowadays to have something like that because our nervous systems are just being bombarded like with all of the technology and blue light and notifications on our phone and just those things, and then on top of that all the big life things that many people are going through. Our nervous systems really need nourishing. We really need to have a tool that can help us, let go of some of that stress and just become more present and grounded. And I think this is such a great tool for that. Another thing I wanted to mention too is this is, the practice of EFT is really nice in combination with other practices as well. So like something like meditation, I really love using them together. So for example, often I'll do a little, EFT session on myself, and then I'll just sit in meditation following that session. And I find that really effective because, a lot of time, if anyone meditates that's tuning in, sometimes it can be hard to drop into that space. And so doing something like tapping first allows us to really calm the nervous system to, again, reduce some of those stress hormones in the body, drop out of some of that overthinking, release some of that tension and stress. And then it's a lot easier to then drop into that meditative space. So I find it's really effective when used together.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. How can listeners find you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Jen Miller Co. So that's probably the best place to connect with me. My website is jenmiller.co as well. But would love to connect with anyone there. I do have a couple like offerings if someone did want to try out this practice. I have a free tapping meditation download on my website. So that's a session to help calm the mind. So if anyone's tuning in that's, going into the holidays and feeling that, then that could be a great resource, and that's for free. So you can get that on my website. And then I also do offer my membership right now that has tons and tons of meditations to support you. But yeah, at Jen Miller Co. Is the best place to find me.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, Jen. This was excellent. And I think, yeah, I could definitely see this being beneficial year round. And because again, I know for me, that's the thing. It like there, I always feel just kind of wound up in the body,
Yeah.
and getting that to release is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And whether, it's tension in the body or in the mind, like I said earlier, it's really supportive on both fronts, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so definitely a great tool to use anytime. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be a time of, heightened stress. It can still ground you even further, even if you're already feeling somewhat calm. So yeah, definitely a really multi-purpose type practice.
Circling back around, sorry, one more question. You'd mentioned earlier about this can help with digestion as well, or if basically kind of if that's your main area of concern, you can work through the tapping sequence for that. How
Mhm.
does it help with that? Is it just some of these, just because these acupressure points are associated with the internal organs and the digestive organs?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So there's a couple ways that it sort of impacts the physical body and our different, body systems. So the first would be, coming back to the fact that it actually, calms the nervous system. It takes us into that parasympathetic state and reduces stress hormones in the body. And so, as we, anyone knows that's sort of in the health space, the stress hormones, interplay and interact with a lot of the other hormones in the body. And so, reducing those stress hormones can be really supportive for many other body systems as well. Specifically with digestion, like there's such a mind body connection with that. And so as probably a lot of us have experienced, when we're really stressed, we may get digestive symptoms, whether that's, bloating and, pain from that perspective, maybe things aren't moving, kind of things. So when we're able to calm the nervous system, it allows the body's energy to actually go back to digestion or really any of the other body systems. Because when we're stressed, all of the energy is going towards sort of that fight, flight, freeze type response. And so the other body systems aren't getting the attention that they need. So in that perspective, it's really supportive. I would say another aspect too is sort of this energetic piece, right? Because we're tapping through those meridian endpoints and rebalancing the energy with the different major sort of organ systems. And as we're doing that, we're saying, verbalizing how we're feeling. And so, if we're experiencing an uncomfortable physical symptom, there's often really an emotional connection to a lot of our physical symptoms and energetic connections as well. Maybe there's stuck energy in the body and that kind of thing. So rebalancing all of that will really impact the physical body as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Jen. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm looking forward to trying out the tapping technique.
Yeah, awesome, Brandy. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure to be here and share about this practice. Thank you so much for having me.